Welcome back into the Dynasty Nerds YouTube page. I'm your host, Garret Price, and today I want to talk about a fact that will help you for your drafts from every single NFL team for fantasy football this season. Let's dig in. All right, we're going to go through each and every team, and I want to give you a fact for a fantasy relevant player that I think is going to affect how you do your drafts, how you look at players, how you evaluate your teams. All these are just little nuggets from each and every team that I think are pretty helpful to help you prepare for 2024. So let's start at the top, the Arizona Cardinals. Kyler Murray finished as quarterback 7 in points per game among all quarterbacks that played at least 8 games or more last season. That was while recovering from a major injury, and now he added the best wide receiver prospect I have seen in a long time. He is going to have a monster year. Look, with him being healthier, him being able to go side to side, he said he was able to move straight lines, but the side-to-side stuff was a little tougher. The rushing yards should go up, and I expect the passing yards to go up. And it's the second year in the same offense. Kyler Murray going to have a big season. The Atlanta Falcons. All right, Kyle Pitts last year was tied for 34th. That's right, you heard this right. 34th in red zone targets among tight ends with only 5. That's less than names like Kyle Granson, Tyler Conklin, Michael Mayer, and Adam Troutman. I would expect that number to at least triple. That's right, triple this season. All of the top tier tight ends had in the 15 to 20 range. I expect Kyle Pitts to be there this year, which obviously gives him a much better chance to put up way higher touchdown totals. Baltimore Ravens, Lamar Jackson passed for the highest yardage total of his career while also posting the highest completion percentage. When we're looking at a guy like this, maybe he's developing more of a passer than we're giving him credit for. Now you go into year 2 with Zay Flowers. I think Lamar Jackson is a sneaky player to now be a long-term asset instead of just that short-term asset of the running quarterback that we've always talked about him being. So he's going to be good for this year, but I think he's going to be lasting a lot longer than we originally gave him credit for. Buffalo Bills. We're looking at James Cook. James Cook finished as a top 12 back in total points for 2023, but maybe that's a little bit of a deceiving stat considering he had tied for the lowest points per game among any top 12 guy since Duke Johnson all the way back in 2017. So I know we're looking at him as a locked and loaded for sure thing as a top tier running back. I'm not sure that's the case. You add in Ray Davis, who could be taking away some goal line opportunities, and James Cook is one of the riskier top end running backs for me this season. David Canales, he spent 2 previous seasons resurrecting the careers of Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield. His next task is to help Bryce Young, who had the worst full season by a number 1 overall pick for fantasy purposes since Jamarcus Russell. Yes, so the Carolina Panthers young quarterback, he's got every opportunity now with this new coach. They fixed that offensive line, at least made it a little bit better, added more assets to the receiving room and the running game. So should be a better year 2 for Bryce Young. But if he can't do it this year, it might be the end of the road. The Chicago Bears, yes, Romeo Doubs, their rookie wide receiver. Every year I spend time grinding the tape, looking at who the top tier players are as far as just raw prospects, not where they land, not their stats, all that stuff, just how they look on tape. I've only scouted 5 other receivers that were a higher score for me than Romeo Doubs. Those players, Marvin Harrison Jr., Davante Smith, Jamar Chase, Garrett Wilson, and CeeDee Lamb. So that's pretty good company for a guy like Romeo Doubs. He's going to end up being a top-tier fantasy player. Let's head over to Cincinnati. Past few seasons with Jamar Chase, he's been playing with backup quarterbacks. He sustained some injuries, all of these things. But Jamar Chase, despite all of this, and being a young player, he has finished as a top 12, a wide receiver 1 in every single season in both total points and points per game. So when you're looking for somebody that is consistently good year in, year out, you are not going to miss drafting a guy like Jamar Chase. We're in Cleveland now. Cleveland Browns last year, David Njoku. Let's talk about this tight end. Last year with David Njoku, when he had Joe Flacco as his starting quarterback, 18.2 points per game. Absolute monster with Joe Flacco. However, in his games with Deshaun Watson as the starting quarterback, 7.4. He is one of my most risky players for this coming season. The Dallas Cowboys. Let's talk about Jake Ferguson. Jake Ferguson had more red zone targets with 24 than any other NFL tight end. And if you look at his situation, it's almost exactly the same as it was last year. I expect him to still be targeted very heavily inside that red zone, and I think he's going to get a lot of touchdowns this season. We're now in Broncos country. Javonte Williams. Yes, he was the 8th running back in rush attempts inside the red zone last year with 41. And you're like, well, he didn't do great last year. Well, might be a few reasons for that. One, he was coming off that major injury, but even more so, he was actually only 30th in carries inside the 5 with 7 total. So he was 8th in red zone carries, but 30th with carries inside the 5. If that number normalizes, Javonte Williams could have a huge improvement in the touchdown department this season. All right, Lions, the Detroit Lions, Jared Goff. Jared Goff is one of the players that has the biggest difference between his home and his road splits. Part of that is the dome versus maybe non-dome, but also there's just a comfort level at home sometimes. In his fantasy points per game at home, we're looking at 18.9. On the road, just 13.7. So in your DFS stuff, or even if you have another quarterback, maybe consider benching Jared Goff when he's on the road, but he's almost a must start while at home. Let's take a look at the Green Bay Packers. Green Bay, we had a rookie wide receiver on the team last year named Jayden Reed. From week 10 on, Jayden Reed tied for 8th in points per game amongst receivers. Yes, 8th. He could be in line for a huge season this year if that trend continues, but there are a lot of other mouths to feed and a lot of good young receivers on this team, so we'll see if that trend continues. Let's head down to Houston with the Texans. They added a new running back this year in Joe Mixon, and you got to feel pretty good if you have Joe Mixon in your fantasy football teams because only 2 running backs have been top 5 in red zone passing targets in both the past 2 seasons. One of them being Christian McCaffrey, the other, the aforementioned Joe Mixon. He's a guy that's going to catch a lot of passes in the red zone, and that leads to a lot of potential receiving touchdowns. All right, let's go to Indy with the Colts here in 2023. Michael Pittman Jr. had over 100 receptions, 109 to be exact, but he had only 4 touchdowns. In NFL history, only 9 wide receivers have ever had 100 catches in a season and also had 4 or fewer touchdowns. So let's expect that number to go up a little bit in 2024. Let's head to Jacksonville. He might not be the biggest name tight end, but Evan Engram actually led all tight ends in targets in 2023, and he finished as tight end 2 overall. The year before that, he was tight end 6. He's sneakily becoming a very consistent tight end that you're always getting at a value. All right, the Super Bowl champion, Kansas City Chiefs, Travis Kelce. We all know he's good, but we might not appreciate how good he really is. Travis Kelce has had 8 straight seasons with a top 3 overall tight end finish. That is the longest fantasy streak for a tight end since these stats were regularly tracked in the 90s. So when you talk about him maybe being the tight end GOAT for fantasy, there's some real conversations to be had. Next up, the Raiders. Davante Adams has been a top 5 player in targets for each of the past 4 seasons. So when you're drafting a player and you want to know that they're at least going to get the volume, Davante Adams is that guy. Top 5 in targets each of the past 4 seasons. If you have a piece of the passing game in LA with the Chargers, you might be a little bit worried. OC Greg Roman, his pass percentage is well in Baltimore, Buffalo, and San Francisco during his career. In 2022, he was 30th. 2021, 22nd. 2020, 32nd. 19, 32nd. In 2016, 31st. 2015, 32nd. 2014, 26th. 2013, 31st. 2012, 30th. in 2011, 30th. Yes, if you have a pass-catching option in LA, those opportunities are going to be a little bit fewer and farther between than with other teams. All right, let's go over to the Rams. Puka Nacua, we all know that he had a monster campaign last year, but his targets per game with and without Cooper Kupp, a little bit startling. Puka Nacua targets per game without Cooper Kupp, 13. Puka Nacua targets per game with Cooper Kupp, only 8.3. I don't think people appreciate how good Achane was last year for the Miami Dolphins. Achane could have rushed for 0 yards on 45 straight plays and still led all running backs in yards per carry in 2023. Yeah, he had 7.8 yards per carry, and that's assuming that all these guys had at least a minimum of 100 attempts. Let's head to Minnesota. TJ Hockenson. We know he was awesome with Kirk Cousins, but should we be a little worried with him not having Kirk? In his career with Kirk Cousins, 14.4 points per game. But without Kirk, we're looking at 10.3 points per game. We'll have to see how things go with Darnold and eventually McCarthy, but that does worry me a little bit. New England Patriots. We don't know who's going to break out from this wide receiver core, but I have a feeling it might be Pop Douglas. Among players with at least a 15% target share, Demario Pop Douglas was second in average yards after the catch, behind only the great Deebo Samuel. So when the ball was put in his hands, he always made something happen. Plug your ears because this is a tough one, but New Orleans Saints. Yes, nobody wants to start and play Taysom Hill, but Taysom Hill has actually finished as a top 12 tight end in each of the past 2 seasons. And honestly, this team has fewer weapons than ever, so we could expect him to have a huge year. His current Fantasy Pros ranking, tight end 20. You're probably getting him at a huge value right now. The New York Giants lost their starting tight end, but help could be on the way. Rookie tight end Theo Johnson was not only the most athletic tight end in this class, but according to the RAS score, he is the 8th most athletic tight end of all time. Got to be a good athlete to be a good tight end. Theo Johnson has it. New York Jets, coming off an injury, losing his starting quarterback, and having one of the worst offensive lines in football according to PFF, Breece Hall still finished as RB2 overall last season. I would expect all of those things to either change or improve in 2024. There is no ceiling for Breece Hall. Let's go to Philly with these Eagles here. For his entire career, Saquon Barkley has had to play behind an offensive line that was always in the bottom half of the league, according to PFF. And most of the time, those offensive lines were in the bottom 6 or 7 as well. Not just the bottom half, just truly bad offensive lines. Now, his offensive line, for the first time in his career, ranks inside the top 5. Pittsburgh Steelers fans, I know you guys didn't want Arthur Smith, but if you have their starting running back, you could probably feel pretty decent because OC Arthur Smith, whether he was the OC or the head coach, has had a running back one every single year of his career except one. Despite my guy Brock Purdy being called a game manager, I think San Francisco's gotten a little more out of him than you would expect. No QB last season attempted more 30 or more air yard passes than Brock Purdy. So he's just not a check down Tommy. He is slinging the rock all over the field. Still great news for all of his receiving options. All right, Seattle, we've got a new head coach, new offensive coordinator there, and that means things might be changing. But last year, Kenneth Walker received the 4th most red zone rushing attempts in football. Will we see that trend continue, though, with this new offensive coordinator, new staff? It's tough to say, but chances are probably not. Let's go to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Despite finishing as a top 5 running back in 2023, Rachaad White was incredibly ineffective as a runner, averaging only 3.6 yards per carry on the 2nd most attempts in the league. He got the rock, but didn't do a lot with it. It's really been just the receiving game, and I'd still be worried because they brought in one of the only players to have more than 50 receptions at the running back position last year in Bucky Irving. Tennessee, their starting quarterback, Will Levis, was pressured at the 2nd highest rate in football in 2023. However, the addition of first-rounder J.C. Latham, free agent Lloyd Cushenberry should help things along pretty well, and then you add in the addition of legendary offensive line coach Bill Callahan, I think he's going to be much better protected in 2024. Washington Commanders, only one quarterback that played more than 10 games attempted fewer 40-plus air yard passes last season than Sam Howell. He only attempted 4 of them. I'd expect Jayden Daniels to greatly increase that number, and that would give much more big play opportunities to their main receiver, Terry McLaurin. All right, guys, that wraps up our 32 facts that you should know. Hope you liked it. Let me know any other interesting facts that you might have for this season. You can put those in the comments, and maybe I'll add them to a future video.